Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lakeside Chats with Lexia. I'm your host, Lexia, and today I am so excited to be joined by Emily Novick and Andrew Darby. Both of them are former student athletes, and now they work as clinical interns here at the Trone Center for Mental Fitness. Emily and Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today, and also sharing so much on an important topic of athlete mental health. Could we get a bit into your personal stories before we get into anything else? So, Andrew, could you share a little bit about your experience as an athlete and then how you kind of transitioned into the mental health field?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a Division 1 athlete at the Citadel. I played on the men's tennis team. Um, and as far as how I got into mental health, I had a really positive experience with a sports psychologist growing up. Um, that was something where I was absolutely, completely against going for any psychological help at all, and it ended up being something that was completely changed my life. And because of that super impactful experience, that's what inspired me to go to grad school, to be a therapist, and to ideally have that same impact on other people that my sports psychologist had on me.
That's awesome. Emily, same question. How did you kind of make your way from, I know you were a former basketball player, how did you kind of make your way into the mental health field?
Yeah, so I played Division II basketball at New York Institute of Technology in Old Westbury, Long Island. And I had a similar experience to Andrew, maybe different in some ways, of that I experienced an injury at a young age in my sport that led me to seeking help mentally to come back from that injury, which connected me to my sports psychologist. And I also had a really impactful and helpful relationship with my sports psychologist that led me to realize that that's something that I want to give back to student athletes as well. And so, in kind of growing through my sport and growing in that capacity mentally and physically, I realized that that was something that I'm very passionate about and wanted to do for others that maybe experience similar things in sports as well.
For sure. Well, thank you both for the work that you are doing, the work that you will do after you graduate. Could you share one of the biggest challenges that you personally might have faced within the mental health field as you were an athlete, or something that an athlete could face that maybe somebody would need to seek help for?
I think one of the things that really stands out to me has been transitions, whether it's been through from junior sports to collegiate athletics or from collegiate athletics to whatever's next. I think those the transitions from the different environments and those different time periods in your life really change your internal state as well and how you respond to those things. And so that's something that I definitely sought out help for as an athlete. Just trying to process what it means to be in this different state of my life and how to proceed with that performance mentality, whether it was, it's just because I'm not on the court anymore doesn't mean that I don't want to be my best. And so that was something that was where a therapist was really helpful to kind of process that and figure out what it looks like to be my best, even in my life, whether, outside of sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I think something that comes to mind for me that maybe isn't talked about enough is that, like losing the love for your sport. And that's something I think all athletes maybe experience at some point in their career because it's such a crucial part of your identity and it's not talked about enough in the sense of it is something that's normal and it's not permanent. And I think in addressing that and understanding kind of where you're at in that moment to find that love again and find that joy in your sport to, make the most of your experience as an athlete rather than maybe the expectations and the pressures that are put on athletes in general, I think is something that definitely can use some more attention and more normalizing.
Absolutely. So, could you touch a little bit on what's different in like sports psychology versus how you might treat someone who's not an athlete? I'm personally not an athlete, so if you
Mm-hmm.
could kind of explain the process behind that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even just in mental health and sports psychology in general, they're very similar in like fundamentally in terms of how we would maybe treat things. And I think that that is helpful in the sense of using maybe different language and things like that to address concerns that show up in athletes. So whether that be like self-talk or like arousal regulation or performance things. I mean, that's very similar to a lot of the things that we see that we suggest for people that are dealing with mental health things as well. And so while there are differences maybe in like the language or how we talk about things in sports, I think that there are a lot of similarities and overlap in terms of like techniques and things that we do use for people that are addressing just mental health concerns in general, or maybe things that are mental health concerns that are sport specific.
Absolutely. So also you both mentioned, both of you have graduated, both of you kind of moved on from that point of your career, but how would you suggest that someone, whether they do fall out of love with their sport or like they have to keep going, or if they have an injury and they can't continue to play like they used to, how would you suggest that they rebuild their sense of self outside of the game, that they're not just an athlete, but kind of building themselves as a whole person in that transition?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I think as you're thinking about your identity as a person, a lot of times athletes often have this very strong sense of athletic identity, meaning they see themselves as an athlete and maybe nothing else. And so, being really flexible about, who you are as a person and really trying to recognize all the different aspects of your life, how you spend your time, what's important to you, and just really trying to be flexible with that as you're thinking about, what's important and who am I outside of my sport? That's something that we know not only helps you as you're making those transitions in your life, you're preparing for what's next, right? And giving yourself that outlet to, think outside of your sport, but it also helps you perform better when you're actually still in that position as an athlete, because it takes a little bit of pressure off when, instead of it a win or a loss, meaning that you are a success or a failure as a person, it now is a piece of what you do and is maybe representative of a performance on the day. So just having that benefit of both the impact on those life transitions, but also, your performance on the court.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that it can also be applied for like other things, like not just, seeing yourself as a student or academics, not putting
Absolutely.
everything into one bucket. So that's really great. Um, so also, could you go into a little bit of the strategies that you all used when you were a student athlete? I know that both of you started to touch on that, but what kind of, especially for you, Emily, when you said that like you did start to fall out of love with your sport, how did you kind of come back from that? Did you ever fall back in love with your sport?
Mhm. I think basketball will always have a place in my heart. I will always love that sport because it was such a crucial part of my life growing up and also took up a lot of my time growing up. And so for that, I will always love basketball and love the sport and all the opportunities and things that it has brought me and the connections and things like that. And so I think for me, what really helped was just like understanding why I picked up basketball and what made me fall in love with it in the first place. And sometimes breaking that down and simplifying that and taking the external factors out of it, like, the influence that our coaches have on us, or, the wins and the losses and things like that. It can get very loud at times when, especially as athletes, we place a lot of importance on how we perform and how we view success and failure. And so I think, internally understanding like that you are able to take that power back and kind of control certain things and situations and control where you put your energy or your enjoyment in your sport kind of helped me, as well as kind of, I always talk about like psychological imagery and like visualization and just kind of, envisioning like how I wanted basketball to look for me and what that looked like. And in that sense, it makes it more of a personal experience, and it allows you to kind of get more control of the situation in a space that maybe at times there isn't things that you can control.
Absolutely. Andrew, did you have any certain strategies that you used during college?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the strategies that I had kind of mirrored Emily's experience. I think I might say it in a different way, but at the fundamental level, it's really similar, which is just obviously being flexible with your your origins of motivation, just really trying to kind of reflect on that and say, look, like because I think throughout your life, your motivation for things is going to come from different places. And so for me, it sounds like my experience was a little bit different than Emily's, where she really tried to hone in on what she was intrinsically motivated for. For me, it really helped having a strong sense of identity as a team player in a very individual sport like tennis, because I definitely felt like I lost a lot of intrinsic motivation for my sport once I started getting paid to play. And so just having that team to kind of fall back on and making it about something that was bigger than myself really helped increase my motivation for my sport, and allowed me to be able to show up and perform at my best regardless of those external circumstances like scholarships or the wins and the losses and stuff like that. I also had an injury in college that made it a lot more difficult for me that kind of impacted my intrinsic motivation, so that's where I had to kind of look elsewhere for those sources of motivation. I'm really appreciative of my teammates for that.
I love that we have two representations of like more the individual side and the team side, because I think that can also have a great deal of things to do with that, and as you've shown, it does. So could you share what are some signs that students could look for in themselves to determine, do they need to seek external sources? Is there a way that like they can determine, should I go to my coach about this? Should I go to my teammates? Should I come to the Trone Center? Could you kind of share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it would be really like problem specific. And so I'd say like the value that the Trone Center has is that confidentiality, right? And so if it's something that you're not certain about, I'd say the Trone Center is a good place to start, just because you do have that sense of confidentiality that you can be confident in, right? So if whatever you're talking about might have some type of consequences that you're not certain if you're okay with or not, then the Trone Center is a great place to start, just because that would stay in the room. And as far as like between players and coaches, I think that kind of depends on some team dynamics, and yeah, I think it would just be really specific to the problem. But I think having a coach as a role model, and depending on what the leadership looks like, being able to have that space and develop that relationship with the coach, that's one thing to consider. And then also too, like for me, having that space to speak with my teammates as well about issues and try to solve that in-house is also helpful too. So I guess like that main highlight just being that you have that guaranteed confidentiality here, and so I definitely would recommend kind of starting here.
Absolutely. And you all had a athlete mental health screening available for athletes on campus. Could either of you share a little bit more about what that looks like, how students maybe can access it next year? I think that the time might have passed for this, but what can they kind of do with those results that they got as well?
Yeah, so it's basically a questionnaire that kind of asks about some of the things you're experiencing, and you rate it on a scale, and it puts it into categories based off of if it rates it basically like green, yellow, or red. So if it's elevated and it's causing distress, or if it's moderately causing distress, or if it's even just something that's green, which is good to see as well. And it basically just gives some insight into terms of maybe some of the things that are going on and causing distress for the student, whether that be like anxiety or depression, eating concerns, a whole slew of things. And so with that, students are also able to come here into Trone Center for Mental Fitness, and we're able to kind of discuss those results with them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a good or a bad thing. It can be in a sense of like, we see that you're doing well in these areas. How can we continue to ensure that you are doing well, or put things in place so that maybe if those levels do become elevated, that you feel like you have the tools to address those. And so I think that's like an important aspect of it as well, is that sometimes when these screenings maybe go out and we reach out to students to check in that like there's a problem, when in reality like we want to just kind of bridge that gap of like, we're here to support you, and that could just be in a sense of like, how can we continue to have you feeling well and good, and have those levels not be elevated? And then how can we get those levels that are elevated into a place that you feel like you can cope and manage them in a way that's healthy for you? And so I think that kind of captures what we do here at Troan Center for Mental Fitness in terms of just like educating students on what that might look like and supporting them and helping them establish those goals to get those levels to where they want them to be.
And so, could you dive a little bit more into the resources that are available for athletes or non-athletes, Andrew?
Yeah. So at the Troan Center for Mental Fitness, we have counseling services, nutrition services, psychiatric services, with that has to do with like medication. And obviously the Earl Student Health Center is upstairs as well. So if there would be any type of health concerns, then obviously you're right where you need to be as far as heading upstairs. And so, yeah, that obviously would just be available to both students and student athletes. So whether it's like performance oriented or mental health oriented, again, like Emily was kind of reflecting, and the value of our services, it's really a space, a confidential space to say, hey, am I where I want to be? And if not, recognizing that you have this whole team of people that are here to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And so that's what we can do for students and student athletes.
Yeah, and one last question for both of you. For someone who might be nervous to take that first step in the mental health journey, I know that there can be a lot of stigmatization, especially at college ages, that, going to the counseling center might be a little bit nerve-wracking. What would you say to that student that's nervous to take the first step?
As a 15-year-old that was forced to go, or else I was not going to be able to continue playing my sport because of parental concerns. It was something that I was completely against, never have voluntarily gone myself, and it ended up being the thing that informed my career path, gave me direction for how I want to be as a person, a coach, a therapist, a academic advisor, a friend, a mentor. And so, I'd say like just giving it a shot is what I would recommend students doing, because it surprised me and changed my life. So definitely would highly recommend just giving it a try, and I guess kind of validating those hesitancies, because I was the first person that was like, absolutely not.
Yeah, I think I would say something along the lines of, you grow most when you're uncomfortable.
Mm.
And so doing uncomfortable things, or at least trying uncomfortable things, is the only way to see if it will work out. And so as someone who also was forced to go and fought to not go, I would not change it for anything. It's made me who I am today, and it's honestly led me to the career that I believe I'm like meant to do. And so, it is, anything that we don't know the outcome to is really scary. And I think that's what makes us all humans, is that sometimes we do scary things, and sometimes they could be the most rewarding things that we do. And so we don't know unless we try. So I would say give it a try, and if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, there's always another step in another direction.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining me on the show today. This has been Lakeside Chats with Lexia. I'm Lexia, and I'll see you guys back next week.